Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Smack the Nation. Wow, it turns out that the code word that we used for the mandatory snake bites rang true at the Oscars, didn't it? As anger management, cock your hand back, Will Smith smacked Chris Rock in front of the nation. Weird times. Now here's Shawn Wayans pretending to be Chris Rock at the 1999 666 MTV Music Awards. And he gets smacked down for telling bad jokes. Let's watch a little bit of this.
Again. Oops, she did it again. What else is up? Child here tonight. That's right. What name? I see you, man. How about temporary? That when Sean Puppet Cone went out in the fence team. In the news again, trying to make a comeback. What the slash. Thank you very much. Oh no, Puppet. Oh no, Britney Spears. Kick me one more that boy.
Now, of course, I fast forwarded through that, but you get the gist of what's going on. And they even zoomed in on Will Smith's face. This was 1999 MTV Music Awards. Now, I got that from one of you. One of you sent that to me. And so I'm not going to take credit for that find, but it's right here on YouTube, you guys. This has been planned for a very long time. Now let's get into some of these headlines today. So one of you sent me some history on the UK crane. And I wasn't aware of this. But these are some old maps showing the former boundaries of Khazaria. And as you can see, it overlays the UK crane almost exactly. There's the UK crane in this area here. And this whole area is Khazaria. Now we're going to be very careful as we get into today's discussion as it relates to the former Khazaria, which is the modern day UK crane, because this is a very sensitive topic. You can make your own observations as we move through some of this historical information. Now, many of you have probably already seen bits and pieces of this on other channels. We did not discover this, but I did want to cover it. Here's another map of the former Khazaria under King Bulan. And as you can see, once again, you've got the boundaries overlapping UK crane. Here's another image as well here. You can see this same boundaries. So these are old maps. And the rabbit trail really began here with this image and the definitive resemblance between the UK crane flag and the Khazarian symbol, as you could see here. And other people had made this observation as well. This is actually from Khazaria. It's an ancient seal. And once you start digging into the history of this, things get pretty convoluted. I tried to read through the whole history of the Khazars and, where they lived, the boundaries of the kingdom, what it meant. Some of them were of certain bluish descent, we'll call it, and others. And then they said they were taken over by a certain king, and then that all disappeared, and then they're coming back. So it gets a little convoluted, to say the least. But here's what we do know. This is Vladimir the Great, from around the time of 980 AD, about 1,000 years after Christ walked the earth. And the symbol here is the same as the UK crane flag. And it even says that it is Khazar inspired, the Khazar inspired trident. Now I'll let you do your own research on who exactly the Khazarians were and their religion, their belief systems. I'll let you go down that rabbit hole. There's plenty of information on the internet. But it does not appear to be good. So to assume that this information has absolutely nothing to do with the current conflict would be an insincere conclusion, wouldn't it? There's a lot of history here. Now, Khazaria has been noticeably silent on everything going on in the UK crane. Almost eerily so. Here's some headlines. This raises some questions, because they always have something to say with things close to their home, don't they? Look at some of these headlines. Lawmakers are starting to grumble about Kazaria's lack of action in the UK crane. They also seem to be complaining about a rare wave of non-bluish refugees. Also, here's a memorial that got hit in the UK crane, and they don't want to talk about it. Not a lot of information out there from Khazaria, is there? No comments, and noticeable lack of, any type of involvement in this, which is not typical. They're not like a neutral nation that does not comment on these kinds of conflicts. Now, here's something else I noticed, or one of you guys actually noticed this. The Smack the Nation rates in the UK crane are the lowest of pretty much most of Europe. Here's the map here. Let's zoom this out so you guys can see this. Zoom it up. Let's do this. So, here's the UK crane. They're sitting at about 34%. Smack the Nation. Here is Romania. They're higher, as are almost all of the other countries. Poland, almost 60%. The only one that falls below the UK crane is countries like Bulgaria, a very tiny country there, and this country here, Bosnia and Herzegovina, fall below the UK crane. But look at the size of UK crane, obviously much larger, with the least Smack the Nation rates. So what does all this mean? Well, I don't really know. It's interesting, though, that they're sitting on the border here with Russia, with less than a third of their population smack-the-nated. So you're going to have to draw your own conclusions from that and what that might mean. Now let's get into some of these other headlines. Let me check in with you guys, make sure you guys are with me, and then we'll get into some of these other headlines today. We're not going to be on here too long today, but there are some things I wanted to talk to you guys about. Now, we all know what virtue signaling is, don't we? And it's when you push something that sounds really good, gets everybody all hyped up because it sounds like a great cause, but it usually ends up being impractical, unfair, or it impedes on a group's rights, certain groups' rights, even though it sounds really great. Usually these ideas are impossible to implement, or they don't consider the needs of everyone. And we know that politicians love to virtue signal. Why? Because once you get the emotion behind it, then you get approval and you get votes. But then we find out that these politicians rarely are able to follow through on these proposals. Case in point, the border. Right? And look at how Bo Jiven was virtue signaling to his left-wing constituency, saying, "Oh, we're gonna go easy on the people." But then when it actually came down to it, the very people on the left who thought what they wanted was a soft border ended up realizing that they didn't want a soft border at all. And then Bo Jiven was doing some of the very same things that Thump was doing. It was just all became one big mess, but nothing close to what he had promised that he was going to run on and win the presidency with. Now, all that he talked about during his run up to the presidency and since he started was getting off of fossil fuels, didn't he? Even if it meant forcing people. Now, several states have implemented their own clean energy legislation outside of the federal laws, but to force the rest of the states to comply would have to come from the top down, wouldn't it? Some kind of economic sanction, I guess you could call it, on states to force them indirectly to adopt fossil fuels. Sometimes the federal government will do this using tax write-offs and different things to tip the balance economically against certain states that don't want to comply with certain laws and certain agendas that the federal government is pushing. Now, here's what's obvious to me at this point is that America left its moral choices a long time ago. We now make choices based on ego and convenience and on being right, don't we? As Bo Jiven does a 180-degree turn and he tells America to start drilling. Now, here's what upsets me about this. I totally believe that we should always be drilling and we should always maintain the strength of America through energy. What I don't like is this political back and forth and using these hot button issues to get people emotionally invested and to get voted in and then doing flip-flops, because this hurts our economy, doesn't it? Because there's no consistency. Because they're doing this on the whims of politics, not on the strength of the economy. Now, don't get me wrong. This makes me happy that they're going to drill, but this should be a consistent thing with some kind of plan, long-term plan. In other words, things like energy shouldn't be able to be touched by politics because there's so many people depending on it. Me and you, our gas prices going up and down and all around. How do you plan something when you don't know what the market's going to be in 5 years? There needs to be some consistency. It shouldn't be able to be touched by, internal forces like politics on lies and agendas and, votes, trying to get votes. Now, we all know that the left is not going to call him out on this, are they? Even though they feel so strongly about the environment. They are not going to call him out because they voted him in and actually they didn't, but they want him to be right against the right, don't they? And all this did with this whole green thing to the people at the top, they don't really care about that stuff. They use it as a hot button issue, or they use it as a mechanism of control down the line to control society. That's why they want us all into the electric kingdom. That's why they want it. But they don't really care about it, do they? And so what they do, it's like, it's like a parent continuing to give a child cookies just because they ask for them. Well, that child's going to end up obese. They're going to end up just a wreck. They're not going to be able to sleep. Right? Well, this is what the left does. They keep emboldening these people. And it's all based on a lie. All these people that are on the receiving end of this kind of virtue signaling have been emboldened. And it creates these spoiled, rotten brats, doesn't it? So, you got Bo Jiven wielding the virtue signaling, not out of morality, but out of manipulation and at his convenience. Bo Jiven, oil man? He'd never characterize himself that way, even given that he wants his presidency to mark the most decisive move yet towards green energy. But uncomfortable realities are forcing Bo Jiven to tacitly condone new U.S. oil drilling and offer federal support for the increased production and export of U.S. natural gas. Now understand that we are now exporting natural gas as well as oil. U.S. oil exports surge Think of the hypocrisy of this. When consumer gas prices are through the roof, why are we keeping this inventory here? So that there is more supply than there is demand, and prices can come down. I thought this was simple economics. It's because they don't really care about your prices for gas. And the fact that they're doing this once again reveals that these choices are not based in morality. The prices are kept high to continue to influence Americans to go green. U.S. oil exports surge, drawing crude oil away from storage hub. U.S. exports have climbed following Russia's invasion. So basically, we are going to be the ones to replace the Russian oil and gas to Europe. This is unbelievable. While we get to pay for that through our gas pump. Unbelievable. The invasion threw the oil market into disarray as companies stopped buying Russian oil and prices skyrocketed. Worldwide buyers are looking to source crude wherever they can. Exports have risen in the recent weeks from the U.S., the world's largest crude producer. Oh, we're the largest crude producer of oil now. That's interesting. Cushing, Oklahoma, known colloquially as the crossroads of the oil industry, is where the holders of U.S. West Texas Intermediate futures contracts take delivery. Its vast storage capacity means it's still considered a guidepost for U.S. inventories. U.S. crude exports rose to 3.8 million barrels per day for the March 18th week, the highest since July 2021. Where's all this oil going? Well, most of it's going probably to Europe to shore up what's going on in Russia. Now, I don't know about you, but this infuriates me because we should basically be getting our oil for close to free. If we're making it, yeah, there's cost to making it and the economy has to go and do its thing, but we should not be paying anywhere near the gas prices we're paying if this is the case, if all this is true. We're exporting oil. What are we talking about? Now, let's change gears here for a minute, because this is all about self-sufficiency and rugged individualism, isn't it? Here's an interesting story from The Guardian. And I ask you this question: if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? We've all heard this analogy, metaphor, whatever you want to call it. And I would say technically no. Because sound is a perception of senses, isn't it? And if there's no receiver on the other end to process the sound waves, then really no sound exists in the way that we define sound. Yes, there are sound waves, but until there's a person to perceive those sound waves and have their brain uncode it and turn it into what we perceive as sound, there is no sound. And I argue that the same applies to people who want to live in the forest. Because if there's nobody around to realize or to experience the impact that a person might have living in the forest by themselves, and there's nobody to be bothered by it, then why should anybody care that some guy wants to live 80 miles in the middle of the wilderness? Now, of course, there's fire issues. I understand that. But you can't prosecute a crime until a crime has happened. So until a fire happens, then you blame somebody for that and go after them. And here's what this YouTuber did. He went out into the wilderness up in the Yukon and decided he wanted to live far away from everybody, which I believe every person on this planet should have the right to do if they want to. Well, they didn't like that because all of a sudden the Canadian government decided he needed a permit. Now, what's the big deal, Casey? Why not just get a permit? Well, permits mean trackability. Permits mean money. Permits mean that there is no self-reliance, and that you are forced into an economic system, doesn't it? So the very reason why someone would go out into the wilderness is canceled out when they're required to have a permit. And so now we live in a world where even if you're not bothering anybody, you can't live off the land for free. So you see what's happening, right? They're forcing you into an economy that you might not necessarily want to be part of. And then that way they can control that economy. And in turn, they control you. They don't want people grifting off of nature for survival, even though that is our inalienable God-given right. You know, the Constitution talks about inalienable rights, but the very most basic and glaring inalienable right would be the very right that God gave man to rule over the earth, didn't he? That was the first right he gave him before there was freedom of speech, before there was the right to, being protecting your personal property and possessions. The very first right that was given in the book of Genesis was the right to rule over this planet and live in it. I wonder if the Supreme Court would honor our inalienable right to exist in our God-given earth. Anyway, let's read a little bit of this article here. Pioneer or squatter? YouTuber's cabin sparks fight over Canada's wilderness. Now, if you're not into these kind of videos, I would recommend you might want to check some of these out. Maybe not necessarily this guy. I follow a couple people out in the Canadian wilderness, and it's amazing. There's a guy that I follow that actually does fur trapping, and he manages the coyotes and wolves out here that pretty much annihilate all small game. If you let these wolves go unchecked, they'll pretty much annihilate all of the wild game, birds, rabbits, all kinds of stuff. And so he traps the fur, which aren't worth much anymore. They used to be worth a lot more. So that's a dying industry, fur trapping. And he's self-reliant. He built his own cabin, and sets up all of the necessary things. They got snowmobiles out here. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do this because it looks too cold to me. I'm already too cold in Connecticut. But to go up there and live 9 months out of the year with snow on the ground, I don't know if I could do that. But some people can. Some people can. Now, here's what the elite are really afraid of. They're afraid that they cannot control these people, and that these people could start amassing large amounts of people who live off the land. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about, sustainability of a couple of trout in a pond way up in the Yukon. What they care about is forcing you into an economic system where you cannot have independence of your own mind, where you cannot be coerced into doing something that they want to do under threat of economic tyranny. That's what this is all about. And they don't want people like this becoming an example to other people. And then all of a sudden, they can't push through agendas like they want to, can they? Let's read a little bit of this article because this is kind of interesting. As much of North America was locked down during the early days of the spam-demic, Matty Clark was in a boat full of supplies motoring up the Yukon River. He was searching for wild lands where he could strike it rich. Getting myself a gold mine, he told viewers on his YouTube channel. Everyone's heard about all the gold up there. You must be curious yourself what's actually going on up there. Can I just show up with all this stuff and end up having a gold mine? I think so. For the last 2 years, Clark has battled the bitter cold and relentless mosquitoes of the boreal forests as he set up a new home in Canada's northern hinterlands, chronicling his survival in regular YouTube updates. But he now finds himself squaring off against a new foe, a frustrated government trying to evict him from his homestead on Inslee Creek, south of the town of Dawson City. Now, the very fact that they just outed this guy's secret location is really messed up. They did that on purpose. Yukon's most famous poet once described the region as unpeopled and still, But despite its vast scale, the territory's government says people can't just show up to a clearing in the forest and build homes without permits. Why not? Who else is using the forest? Why does a bear get to show up and use a clearing in the forest? Why does a wolf get to show up and do that? Weren't we given dominion over all these animals? And if they can do it, then shouldn't we be able to do it too? Now, I was always puzzled about, dumb laws like you can't go to the bathroom in public. Now, I wouldn't recommend that, of course. I'm using this as an example. Because just down the road, you see a cat doing it or a dog doing it. But you're not allowed to do that. And you can actually get cited and fined and thrown in jail for doing it. We live in backwards world where the very nature that we're supposed to have dominion over is held at a higher standard and given more power and control and protection than human beings. And to God, that is a form of blasphemy. It's a form of false worship, worshiping nature over man. And that's what all this boils down to. Let's keep reading here. It says, since last year, officials have been trying to get Clark and another self-styled pioneer, Simon Turney, to leave. Territory says they are illegally occupying public land. That's like saying jumbo shrimp. How do you illegally occupy a public land? That makes no sense. They are now petitioning a court to intervene. Originally from Newfoundland, Clark operates a popular YouTube channel called Scout Outdoors, which documented his 2020 journey up the Yukon River to stake a mining claim and a real-life tutorial on building a log cabin. The government should be paying this guy to show people how to be self-sufficient. This is valuable information. Every single school child in the world should learn these kinds of skills before you graduate from high school. How to build a log cabin, how to survive in the wilderness if you had to. What happened to our world where these things are now seen as a negative instead of a positive? In the videos, you can be seen felling trees and chopping notches into the logs. This is the real dream for me here now, he says in one video as he speeds along a snowy landscape on a snowmobile. It's a good life out here. Everyone told me it was going to be a real struggle, and it was, but the hard times are vastly outweighed by the good times. This video has often received 10,000 views, and the government has used them and his social media posts as evidence against him. So this is what they're doing now. They go on your social media and they make a case against you. Now this happened, I think this might have happened to me once. You got to be very careful. You put up these phishing videos, and if someone thinks you're doing something wrong, they will look through your videos and use that in court against you. Now, what cop do you know has time to go on YouTube and try to play gotcha with people trying to catch a fish? That's weird, isn't it? Let's keep reading here. Territory alleges that Clark had errors in his mining claim and permit. Well, of course, they're going to find errors. And says that officials saw no evidence of mining by the YouTuber. So what? Maybe it was the wrong time of year to mine. Even if Mr. Clark had honestly and properly staked a claim, doing so did not give Mr. Clark authority under the Placer Mining Act or any other Yukon legislation to construct a cabin at the site for his permanent residence, said the government's court petition. So you see what's happening here. They're gaslighting this guy. They're trying to find anything they can, any technicality to get him off that land, aren't they? In an email to a territorial land manager, Clark says the fight is about more than one log cabin. I do not look at myself as a trespasser, but a guardian or steward of the land, which is exactly what Adam probably said, didn't he? While his videos stress Clark's isolation, the second season of his show is called Alone in the Yukon. His cabin is less than a kilometer from Simon Turney's, as well as those of two other squatters. Here's the hypocrisy and irony of this. If someone goes and squats in a real situation, they go squat in your house because you're not living in it. Good luck trying to get that squatter out of the house, right? because they're protected, aren't they? But when a person goes out in the middle of the wilderness that doesn't belong to anybody, now they're called a squatter. Turney, who sees himself as someone learning the old skills of the backcountry living, arrived in the region in 2016 and admits he has no valid permits to occupy the land. But like Clark, he has no intention of leaving. Rather than fussing over bylaws and building codes, Turney has employed a more abstract defense, arguing in an editorial last year that his values were under attack. So, we get the gist of this article. I just wanted to read a little bit of this to you to help you understand the true nature of why governments don't like rugged individualism. It has nothing to do with you doing anything wrong. It has to do with control. I had a couple more stories for you guys before we end the show today. They found these mysterious pillars of light showing up in Texas. I think this was Texas. Let's scroll down here. This was just uploaded yesterday. Let's see here. Where is this? There's some video of this too. Yeah, Houston, Texas. Now, how many of you live in Houston, Texas? I'd be curious to see if you've seen anything like this. But let's take a look here, because this is crazy. Now, I'm going to play this news story here, and you're going to hear how these people try to discredit free-thinking people like ourselves, who simply have an opinion about what this might be. Let's play this.
Before we go, lots of people are asking us about this, a bright orange light in the sky. It was a vertical line that appeared high up in the clouds. It went away around 9:15, but we're getting reports of people seeing it from LaPorte to Clear Lake, Lake City, even down in Manville. Dave, you have a theory about what this could be.
I'm 99.9% sure it's a flare that was taking place at the Manville
Oh, don't worry. It's just a flare.
Basel plant, Lyondell Basel plant.
Yes.
Near LaPorte.
Okay.
And the thing is, cloud droplets, which is what the clouds are made out of, little water droplets, are highly reflective. So
Due to the structural integrity of the building and the high heat,
they absolutely can reflect something like that. And I was told it was a gigantic orange flare, and
I was told by my control. Oh,
that
sorry.
would make sense.
Have you ever seen that before?
Not like that.
Yet I've never seen anything like this before.
Not as clean as high resolution as that.
Wow.
But that's a big one, so that's what it was. It's gone now.
I hope you're right.
Me too.
Some folks had some interesting theories on
I bet.
social media.
I bet.
Exactly. You know where this is going.
You know where this is going. Don't you love it how they just try to discredit free-thinking people by always coming up with some kind of logical explanation? It's like talking over somebody. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and they start talking over you like they're smarter and have more credentials than you? And here's the truth. Their guess is as good as ours. They don't know any other information that we don't know. I'm tired of the condescension when it comes to authority figures that really don't know what they're talking about. They're probably covering some things up. Now let's read a little bit. I think that article pretty much, that little news clip pretty much explained what this article says. Let's just scroll through it real quick. See if there's anything else in here. People spotted the mysterious red flare over Houston, Texas, the night of Wednesday, March 23rd. Oh, day after 3/22. Others noticed it over Pearland, League City, Deer Park, and Missouri City. Wow. So you've got Missouri City and Houston, Texas. But a similar mysterious beam of light was also spotted on the other side of the world in areas like Egypt several days before. You can see the light in the video above, which we just played. So they're calling this a pillar of light. And that's pretty much it. And they just make fun of people who have any other types of, opinions about what this might be. Now, let's get into some of this other stuff here. This story is huge because people who got the Smackseen are reporting hearing problems. Now, I'd like to hear from any of you who happened to get the Smackseen if you've had anything like this, because this is crucial information. So they're investigating this. The WHO is examining potential hearing problems linked to Vidco Smackseen. Rare reports of hearing loss and other auditory issues. Now, we've already heard that smell and taste is affected, right? And they're saying that that's after Vidco, not the Smack the Nation. But why would someone now have an auditory issue? These are all nerves, coming up out of the brain. You only have 12 sets of intracranial nerves, and 3 of those are now covered in terms of potential problems with the Smack the Nation or Vidco 19. So this is really weird phenomenon. These delicate nerves going into the auditory canal, as well as the taste buds and olfactory nerves for smelling. What is really happening here? Let's read a little bit of this. In a newsletter, posted on its website, International Public Health Agency said that it has been made aware of sudden hearing problems, tinnitus, ringing in the ears, that may be associated with Vidco Smackseen. 367 cases of tinnitus, 164 cases of hearing loss globally among people who had received Vidco Smackseen. Now, a lot of people get tinnitus and hearing loss, don't they? How many of those people might not make the connection to the Smackseen that didn't report these cases, right? There's probably tens of thousands, there could be millions of people who just don't think to make the connection and didn't report it. In other words, these kinds of things are very underreported, and the medical establishment accepts that reality, don't they? So when they say here that out of more than 11 billion doses, this is no big deal, well, how do they really know it's no big deal until you put the word out and tell people, look, there could be a connection to this. And if this happened to you, let us know. And I'm sure that if they put that kind of word out, these numbers would be way, way higher. So the people that got tinnitus range from ages 19 to 91, which is pretty much everybody. 3/4 were women. So what's that about? The reports came from 27 countries, including Italy, the UK, and the US. More than a third were reported among those working in the healthcare industry. Reports were identified by this monitoring center. Many patients recovered. Others had anecdotally tinnitus developed post-sticker, has been unrelenting and a life-altering for months. The condition has been described as a ringing, buzzing, or hissing noise. Hissing is like what snakes do. There's no known cause for tinnitus, and so far there's no proof that the Smackseen has caused any hearing problems. So they're saying that they don't know yet. They're investigating it. These are just reports. So, weird. Up to 10% of the U.S. population is estimated to have experienced tinnitus from any cause. So that's about it for that. Now, this is our last story, and this is a very important story. Apparently, they have found microplastics in human blood. This is the first time this has happened. We've heard all of these stories on microplastics, haven't we, over the past couple of years? This is kind of a new phenomenon they've been talking about. First, they wanted us to believe that there's plastics littering the earth, pollution in the oceans floating around that do not break down, even though these plastics were made out of petroleum products. I don't know if you knew that, but a large portion of oil is used to make plastic. I didn't know that, but apparently it is. And that was the first programming, and now they're trying to tell us that it's in the human blood. And I'm starting to wonder, are they telling us this to prepare us for little things that they want to put in our body so that we're not alarmed when we find them? Is this programming to dismiss the people who claim that they have Morgellons and things like this? I don't know. Kind of sounds like it. Let's read this. Microplastics found in human blood for the first time. Discovery shows the particles can travel around in the body and may lodge in organs. So this is also to scare people into being more environmentally friendly. Microplastic pollution has been detected in human blood for the first time, with scientists finding the tiny particles in 80% of the people tested. The discovery shows the particles can travel around the body and may lodge in organs. The impact on health is yet unknown. Researchers are concerned as microplastics cause damage to human cells in the lab, and air pollution particles are already known to enter the body and cause millions of early deaths a year. Huge amounts of plastic waste are dumped in the environment, and microplastics now contaminate the entire planet. From the summit of Mount Everest to the deepest oceans, people are already known to consume the tiny particles in food, water, as well as breathing them in. They've been found in feces of babies and adults. Scientists analyzed blood samples from 22 donors, all healthy adults, and found plastic particles in 17. Half the samples contained PET plastic, which is commonly used in drinks bottles, while a third contained polystyrene used for packaging food and other products. A quarter of the blood samples contained polyethylene, from which plastic carrier bags are made. So, here we go. All right. So those are the headlines I got for you guys today. We'll be back on here tomorrow with... What are we going to cover tomorrow? Oh, we're going to cover that montage that I did yesterday. I uploaded a montage yesterday afternoon. If you haven't seen that, you might want to check that out. It's just basically a Smackseen ritual. Some clips from several films in which Will Smith and Chris Rock were either getting smacked or smacking other people. So it's apparent to me that this has been a trend. The programming's been there for a very long time. And this latest episode at the Oscars was just that. An episode. A play. Now, I always read through the comments, and many of you made several observations. Something about Pfizer selling a new alopecia drug, and that they actually sponsored. I keep saying Oscars. I don't know. Is it the Oscars or the Grammys? I don't know. But they're basically sponsored it, and maybe this was all just a publicity stunt to raise awareness for hair loss. Now here's where things get interesting, because this hair loss thing is very real, and it has become even more real after VidCo-19. If you haven't already, go onto Facebook and look in some of the forums and things and groups. There are people losing their hair, and it's a phenomenon. And many people are blaming it on VidCo-19, but others are blaming it on the smacking of the nation. So here we are, full circle. Smacking and hair loss. So, these people just can't help themselves, can they? Here we have hair loss happening, and they're going to even make money off of that, aren't they? Something that they may have possibly caused in some way, shape, or form. So, this is the world we live in now, you guys. Things are getting really weird. Have any of you started losing your hair? I'm just curious. Let us know in the chat so we can get a real indicator of what's really happening in this world, because I don't believe anything that we read in the news anymore. Have any of you had tinnitus? Well, we've all had tinnitus. That's something that just goes with the territory of being in this community, right? I think most of us have had it from time to time. I had it for years. But hair loss, that's something a little bit different, isn't it? Okay. Some of you have, yes, a lot of you have had hair loss. Wow. I gotta zoom this out a little bit. It's too close. Okay, that's better. All right. Some of your wives are losing hair. All right. We can do a little Q&A right now if you guys would like. Is there anything you want to talk about that I haven't mentioned yet? Wow. A lot of you have had hair fall out in handfuls. Wow. Yeah, we have to say vidco because you can't talk about it anymore. So we just switch everything around. The code is we take the first letter of the second word and we move it to the last word, the first word, and flip-flop them. And that's how we talk on this channel in case you get confused. Sometimes we'll break the word in two, like with vidco, and just reverse it. Stress causes hair loss too, yes. Can I decode falling down? Yeah, I know a lot of people have looked at that. There's actually he walks into a convenience store and there's a street sign inside the convenience store that says like CORONA, I think. So, have I decoded Electric Kingdom yet? I don't think that's there's no movie. That's actually a song. The song. I don't think I've looked at the lyrics too closely on that song. We've talked a lot about it. Loss of appetite, not eating well, will make your hair fall out. Yes. Yeah, it's our version of Pig Latin. I guess you could say that. Wow. Some of you have gotten tinnitus after supplements. Interesting. Have you done a decode on Ferris wheels? No, I haven't. All right, you guys. Well, we'll break down that montage tomorrow. We'll take a much closer look at it. And this whole smacking ritual. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I don't believe it's a real story, but everyone is talking about it. So it's good to break this down and expose the programming leading up to the whole smacking thing, because they were talking about it as we just demonstrated at the beginning of the show when I showed you an MTV Music Awards. By the way, Chris Rock actually hosted that MTV Awards as well. So it wasn't just a random award show in which the Wayans brother was copying Chris Rock and channeling him. He was actually hosting that. And the Wayans skit that you saw was just one portion of that award show. And it's weird how they zoomed in right on Will Smith's face during that show, as if they were casting the ritual forward till the now in 2022, which is just bizarre to me, but crazy times, you guys. All right, I love each and every one of you. Have a great rest of your day. See you guys tomorrow. Take care and be safe.